Hi everyone, I'm Philipp. Maybe you've met me at some conference before or some meetup. That's pretty much what I do. I just go around and try to show off the fancy new stuff that we have. Today is no exception. So let's see where we can take this. So yeah, I work for Elastic. We're the company behind the entire Elastic stack that developed over the time. And yeah, I'm a developer advocate, whatever you want to call it. I just try to know stuff and solve your problems. So if you have any general questions, just come to me afterwards, and I'll try to help you out. Who's familiar with our stack, just to get a general idea? OK. Not all that many. OK. Give me 3 minutes for the back in the days. Back in the days, in 2010 or so, we started with Elasticsearch, which is very widely used for full-text search. So for example, if you search on GitHub, Stack Overflow, Wikipedia, behind the search box, there's always Elasticsearch doing the search. That's working very well. People are using that widely. And then we figured out maybe it's not just search that you want to do, or maybe other problems are actually search problems. Because, for example, logging is something nobody wants to store logs. Or does anybody enjoy storing logs? You care about what is in the logs. And normally, you want to find something in the logs. So for us, logs are also a search problem. That's why we kind of added more components. We have Kibana for the visualizations, and Logstash, which was the tool to get data, parse it. I mean, parsing is like running a regular expression. Does anybody like writing regular expressions? Yeah, that's the Stockholm syndrome, right? When you get so used to it. Yeah, sometimes it fixes the problem, or you could avoid the entire problem by writing out in a structured log format right away, but maybe you...
I don't write the software I want to write.
But,
I parse the logs.
OK. Maybe you can bribe the developers to write the proper log appender, but I can give you some stickers for that, to bribe the developers. So maybe you could avoid that, but anyway, that's kind of the idea. Or Logstash could enrich your data. What do I mean with the enrichment? Any guesses what is enrichment? For example, I have an IP address, and I want to get the geo address of an IP address, so the geo-IP mapping, just to draw it out. Anyway, so that's kind of like very widely used. This was known as the ELK stack. It obviously also had the ELK, because, well, Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana, that's all in combination. And then we added this other component called beats, and then it was kind of ELK-B, because beats is like a lightweight agent or shipper to collect data and forward it. The Icinga beat was mentioned in an earlier talk today already. So the beats are like, we have some pre-built beats to do stuff, like we have something called FileBeat to collect log files, which is basically like tail F on steroids over the network. We have metric beat for metrics, etc. But there's also Icinga beat, which can basically get or talk to the Icinga API and then just take the data and forward it to Logstash or Elasticsearch. The problem then was, well, we tried with this ELK-B or BELK. This is the ELK-B or BELK. You can see it's a B, it has Helco horns. It's kind of the ideal combination. However, since we're always about scaling, this is not very scalable. Because what happens if we have another open source component? Then we get another letter, and whatever the letter will be, it will probably be very hard to make up another animal. And also, we will need to redo the entire branding again. And nobody wants to do that. The recruiters are still asking for J2EE developers. And that has been more than 10 years. So once the name is out, it's very hard to get rid of that. And we don't want to be stuck in that. So by now, we try to call it the Elastic Stack. But it doesn't matter. If you say ELK, we will still understand. We're not ashamed of where we're coming from. But, well, there is beats. And beats is kind of one of the important parts in the stack, like with the Icinga beat. So in the end, you have this entire stack. So you have the beats, which are the shippers, which can collect data and forward it. Logstash, which can do the parsing and enrichment. But you would run that more or less centrally, because it's based on the JVM now. JRuby might be a little heavier. You don't want to put it on all your production servers. They forward the data to Elasticsearch, where you store everything. And then Kibana can visualize. And, well, we're doing the same thing today. I'm just using Icinga beat. And I'm using the Icinga beat or Icinga Vagrant setup with the Elastic Stack, which brings all the stuff that we need for this demo. So you just need to run Vagrant up in the Elastic folder there, and then you're good to go, pretty much. That's the general idea of what I've done here. So the Icinga beat is basically just talking to Icinga, getting data from there, and forwarding it then to Elasticsearch, which stores it, and Kibana can then visualize it. Icinga beat also has pre-built dashboards to show you what you have in your data. So let's take a look what that actually looks like. So if you've never seen it, this is Kibana. Let's have a quick look at what data we have in here. So you can see we have, is that readable for everybody? Hopefully, yes. So you can see in the last 15 minutes, we had 5,800 or something events in the Icinga beat index. There are other indices, but let's focus on the Icinga beat index for now. And down here, you can see one of the actual documents. And this is what we will be, so this is the data that we are getting from Icinga. And this is what we want to visualize now. So for example, we could see which hosts we have here, though that will not be super interesting because, well, it's one Vagrant box. Normally, that might be more interesting. Or you could see what is the status of a service or what is the response time. Like whatever you have in your data and whatever you're collecting here, this is your Icinga data that you have. So let's see what pre-built dashboards we have. Let's head over to the, let's start with the status. So you can see here, this is a live dashboard. We could just change the time frame, by the way, as well, and say in the last 4 hours. Probably I had stopped my laptop at some point. You can see here my laptop was sleeping, but otherwise we were collecting data. And this is just the data nicely visualized from what Icinga has been collecting. So you can see I have only one Icinga version because it's only one Vagrant box. I have one MySQL schema, and I only have a single node, which is probably not that common, but all my events are coming from one single node. Your production system will probably look a bit different. And then you can see the various checks that we have here running here. For example, the host checks, you can see we have one for 1 minute, 5 minutes, and 15 minutes. And over time, we have the various values. And let's look into one of these visualizations. So first off, you can make this one larger to see what is going on here. Let's say we want to limit it down to the last hour again. So we have the full data. You can see this is the data that we have here. Now, how did we actually get to that data? So I'll just hit edit. And then I have this little tool here where I can say I want to edit this visualization just to see what has been built here. And the actual magic is this box. This is timeline, which has its own syntax to put stuff together. It has like a fluent interface to put various things together. So every time you try to access an Elasticsearch index, like the one we have with Icinga beat, you do .es. And then you have metric equals something. So here we're calculating one specific metric. And what we're doing is we're calculating the average, and then we define after the colon from which field. So you can see Icinga status, active hosts, checks 1 minute. We calculate the average of that. We pick a color for that that looks nice. We label it with the 1 minute interval, and then we say this is the amount of host checks. So this is the title is for the entire chart, but the rest is just for this 1 minute interval. And then here, this is the one for 5 minutes. So this is this one here. And then we have the same thing again for, oops, this is not what I wanted, for 15 minutes. So you can see here we're just trying to get to a different variable. We all give them different colors and the right label, and this is what you get over time. And up here, we have basically said, like, oh, this is the last hour, or we could just switch that down to 15 minutes. And then you could also mark something and drill down into it, whatever. So this is one way to put this together. However, sometimes it's not super nice to write this query. Like this one is actually pretty okay, but sometimes it can get pretty complicated to build something like that. Timeline was kind of the hot new thing, I would say, like 2 years ago. I don't exactly know how old the dashboards are, but I would assume at least a year, maybe. I just wanted to quickly show you one other way to visualize stuff which might be easier sometimes or harder. It depends. For example, to reproduce exactly this visualization, it's actually quite tricky. But I hope we'll get there. So the fancy new thing, actually, these are all the visualizations that you can build today. And the most powerful one, or that might be most interesting, is the Visual Builder. The Visual Builder is basically, rather than having a big blank text box and you start from nothing and you need to type into it whatever you want to create, it has more of a UI-based approach. So this is more the clicky fraction. The VI fraction will probably want to stick to timeline. The clicky fraction will want to come here. You don't have to raise your hand who is where. Otherwise, we will have bitter fights, I know. So what do we have here? Actually, let me open the visualization. This one was host check by time. So this is what we want to create. And I want to create something similar in the Visual Builder. So here we're creating a new one. Visual Builder, come to me. What we're seeing by default here is a count. A count is just the number of documents we have added every 10 seconds. Luckily, it says here, so I don't have to think too hard. But here, every 10 seconds, we have a data point, basically. And we have the number of documents. That is not very helpful yet. To get to the other visualization, so let's say this is the 1 minute one, by the way. And instead of having the count, we need the average, because the other one also had the average. If I just saw average. And then, instead of typing something, you can type as well, but you also see, like, these are your options, basically. And I think it was host checks, active host checks, 1 minute. This is the one I want. So here you see little dots. And the dots are kind of the same as the other one. Only we're kind of missing the line. That is kind of the first tricky thing here, because we have a lot of documents which have 0 as the value here in the middle. This is supposed to be every 10 seconds, but we only have an actual measurement every 1 minute. And that's why we have basically these holes in between. So to smoothen that out, you need to head to the panel options and then say, I want to have an interval of not auto, but I want to smooth this out over 1 minute intervals. Then it's kind of complete again. That is the first thing that might throw you off. The second thing here is in the data, I don't want to say, like, here you can say various things. For example, we have events. I think this is always per second, so let's call this per second. And then you can see, yeah, this looks better. One other way to make this look more like the other one is we say this doesn't have any filling, because right now it was filled with 50% opacity from of the same color that we had picked here. So now it looks more like the same. I don't think we had any points or dots. So let's make this 0, and we keep the line width. I think the other line width is like 2 or something like that. So let's check. This looks more or less like this, hopefully. That's good. This was the 1 minute. Now let's simply copy that. Let's make this 5 minutes and make it, let's pick blue for that one, doesn't really matter. No, I like this one better. And this one here, host checks 5 minutes. And then we do another round, and we make this one, let's make it red. This one is the 15 minutes, host check 15 minutes. Okay. Hopefully this does more or less the same thing that I want. Okay. How do I get that into the dashboard of the other one? Any guesses? Well, first we should save it. Let's call it TSVB, which is time series visual builder new. And then let's head over to a dashboard. And if I haven't have done that correctly, that was status. We need to edit that. We need to add an existing one. I called it new. It was added at the bottom. So here, let's drag this up right next to the other one. Come here. And we can make this fit here. Bless you. OK. Almost, but not quite. The legend is kind of stupid, right? Let's get rid of the legend. So here in the panel options, we have, do we want to show the legend? Yes, no, no. Let's save again. Let's reload. I think it's pretty much the same line, hopefully. Whichever you prefer, it's up to you. This is just a different way of building that. It kind of has similar functionality, but this one actually can do quite a bit more. A, it has not just time series, it has other visualizations in it as well. And B, what is quite nice, for example, is it has annotations. So for example, every time you change something in your system, you could just add an annotation and then have like a vertical, I don't have annotations right now, but you would have a vertical line here, and it would be annotated with Philipp deployed something in your application, or Philipp added a host. And then you don't have to run around the office and shout who did what. Because every now and then that happens that something changed in your system, but nobody knows why and what. OK, so these are the visualizations that are pre-built, but let's try something new. Sometimes your management wants some nicer dashboards. Like the dashboards we have here are already not bad, but it's kind of still, even when I collapse that, it's kind of like still this typical dashboard thing. And maybe you want to have your proper corporate identity in a dashboard you want to put on a screen or in a presentation. So for that, we have something new called Canvas. And Canvas is initially a bit scary, because when I create a new one, it's just a big blank space. And a big blank space is always like, what do I do? Where do I get started? And you can throw in various elements here. So the first thing is, let's change the resolution so it will properly fill the screen when I put it to full screen afterwards. And then what I want to do, for example, is let's start with Markdown. This is the simplest one. This is a lot of text that I don't want. Let's say hello. Apply it. And we have hello here. You can then style this entire thing. For example, you could just say, hey, I just want to, I know CSS. I think we had a discussion about CSS earlier today. Those who know CSS and want to get involved, so you could just reuse CSS here to style that. So on my element, this is a header of the first level. I want to say the font size is actually 100 pixel. And when you apply that, you have hello. Who should we greet? Who wants to be hello? Let's throw in some graphics. So we have an image. And by default, it uses our logo, which is kind of like a bit pushy in my opinion, but OK. Let's replace that. Let's make that a little smaller. And let's fit that in here. So this might make more sense. And you could even present that, and well, this is hello Icinga. Generally, by the way, for the areas that are relevant here is you can change to full screen. Here you have all the details for this one. So for example, I call this my Icinga test canvas with a specific resolution. You could add some custom CSS. You could say like, hey, we want to have like blue as the background color because I think that looks nicer. Maybe, maybe not. And then here you would not just have one page, but you could have multiple pages. So you could add a second, a third, etc. page. And then you can just scroll through them. So basically, we have redone PowerPoint. But why? Why would we redo the PowerPoint? I mean, yes, management wants PowerPoint. You need to have PowerPoint. The thing is, sometimes you either want to put that on a big screen and you want to have like up-to-date data, or sometimes you need to do reports on a frequent basis, like a weekly report. And maybe you have this, that you have some data somewhere in an Excel sheet or in some other source, and then you copy the same data on a weekly basis into a PowerPoint to present it to somebody. And the idea is kind of to get rid of that problem to have the copying between PowerPoint and something else. So these elements are fully interactive. For example, I could just say I have a metric here. Let's pull that one aside. This one is also slightly curious. Why does it say 122 countries? What is up with that? So here, now we have, I haven't shown that before, but we have this data thing here. And we can pick the data source. And by default, we have something called mock data. And the mock data is, it's just like, it will always be pre-filled to help you getting started. And mock data is just, we have countries and stuff like that in the mock data set. So it will always be pre-filled. You could just pull raw Elasticsearch documents into that, but that's not super interesting unless you want to show it in a table. This is not very helpful for like a metric that we have here. We can use timeline, we will get to that. And then we have SQL, which is interesting. Does Elasticsearch speak SQL? Well, we kind of do now. We have like a read-only SQL layer, and this one is pretty well integrated into that one. So for example, I want to have that all the events from my Icinga beat. How many events have I collected from my Icinga beat? What is the right SQL query? Or let's ask differently. Most of you look old enough to still know SQL. It's just a young generation that just knows NoSQL and like this old thing SQL. So what would be the right query to get all the events from my Icinga beat? What should I type? Yeah, we'll do a count of, let's do everything. And then we will need to use the right index name because logstash by default is not so helpful. It's called Icinga beat. And then I saved this, and I broke it. Because my expression failed, which is weird. At first, it threw me a bit off, like, why would this fail? Also, by the way, we can fold this down. Nobody needs that. The expression failed because we have changed the data. It says unknown variable country, which makes sense. Before we had a country, now we don't have a country anymore. Because here we have unique, and now we need to pick that column, which is count one. And now we have one event. What are we doing wrong? We have, this here is not the unique value. Yes, we have one unique value, but we want the actual value of how many events we have in here. And now we see how many events we have collected here. By the way, we can just easily style that because I said, well, it's like PowerPoint. You can go pretty crazy with that one. So let's give it a bit more space. Let's take the countries. First off, the countries are not countries. These are now events. And let's say these are also 48. You could also change, I don't know, make this grayish. Not sure this is better, but it's different. So now we have collected this value here. By the way, something that might be helpful is as, let's call these events. What will happen when I save? Obviously, it will break. But once you have started naming stuff correctly, then you can always use the right name, and then you're good. OK, so that's nice. So we know we have 120,000 events. Maybe you want to see in what time frame we had 120,000 events. Or maybe you're only interested in the most recent events. So we could add a time filter. Let's get that a bit better into the view. The time filter is there's not much to select here. I can basically say what time frame am I interested in. So let's say I'm interested in from 3:30 today until 4 p.m. So an hour ago to 23 minutes ago, and you can see in that time frame we collected 11,000 events. Let's leave that here for a moment and add something else. Maybe you want to also see some graph of what data you have in there. So let's add another element. I'll go for a line chart. let's put that here. We want to change from our demo data. The one we haven't used yet is TimeLion. And we'll just reuse TimeLion because, well, our other query was TimeLion anyway already. So that should be easy to adopt, right? We just take this one here. We're targeting the Elasticsearch index. We'll ignore the color and stuff like that because that's more sugar around it. So basically, when I say Elasticsearch metric, blah, 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 this should work, right? So yeah, it didn't throw a syntax error, but it kind of didn't really work. Why? Well, we need to pick the right values. So the x-axis, let's say this is the timestamp. The y-axis is also the value, and this is the value of the value, which is kind of a weird way of saying the value of the value, but the value of the value is exactly my metric here. By the way, if you have lots of indices, you might want to say index equals Icinga beat. But that shouldn't change anything. And you can see here, now we have these events. And you can see this is also this time frame that we have here. We could try to tweak this a bit and make this nicer or more interesting. Let's say, for example, I want to make the size, or let's generally change that. So we don't want to have a line. I only want to have a point. And the point should be depending on the value. So I say the size determines the value. So you can see the further up you're on the y-axis, the larger the dot is. And then what you could also do is, for example, you could say, I want to have a text. And the text should be also the value. So you can see here, these are the actual values that we have in there. So you see, this is 19, this is 35, and sizes will match accordingly. You can go pretty wild to put together whatever you want here. OK, now let's say we don't want to always manually pick the time, because this is kind of annoying. When you want to have that on a big dashboard, on a TV screen, you don't want to click, like, give me the last 15 minutes or whatever. What you want to have is you want to get rid of this one. You want to get rid of this one. And you could, for example, say, I want to have this auto-refreshing every 5 seconds. And let's quickly see. You see, every 5 seconds, we should get more events. The only thing that is weird is, like, what is happening here? Something is kind of very broken. Because we didn't specify the time frame. That is another thing that is slightly annoying or confusing at first here, is that by default, there is a warning down here for TimeLion, which says you either should have this time filter element, which I've just removed, or you need to specify which time frame you're actually interested in. And to do that, we need to look a bit further than this clicky UI. There is actually code behind all of this. It's just hidden behind the clicky UI. And here you can see this is what I've added here. But what we need to do is, luckily, this does all the auto-completion. And this query, and we need to actually be in the query. We need, we need to be here from. Luckily, this supports a from. And then it says, this is the default value. I'll just pick this. So now, minus 1 year ago, so data 1 year old. But this is not very helpful for my example. Let's say like minus 15 minutes. And then you can run this. Let's get rid of the code editor. Let's make this a little larger. And then hopefully, I don't want to export it. Hopefully, this should update every 5 seconds now. You can see we get more events, and our timeline moves along, and you can see what is happening here. However, as you can tell, I'm not much of a designer. This is painful. And this is not what you should be seeing as the final point here. I want to point, like, we have pre-made dashboards for that. By the way, you don't need to save anything. This canvas has been saved. So I call it Icinga test canvas. This is the one. If I open it up, it has exactly the same data as before. It might take a second to refresh, but this is what we've just built. But let's look at something. If you are a designer, it could look a little better. So we have, this one is a pre-built demo that we have with a data set that is randomly generated. This one here, let's put this on refreshing. No, this won't refresh, but it doesn't matter. So here, for example, you could see, this is what it could look like if I could design. And, oh no, you can see that data is still being generated. So you can see the total visitors are changing, the bytes transferred, the total issues. Here, this flame is basically how many issues you have, and that would fill up or go down. You can see when the issues were. You can see over 24 hours how that was structured, the response codes that you have, if stuff is up or down, and all that kind of stuff. And this is all live and data-driven, so you don't need to pre-build anything anymore and copy it out to PowerPoint, but you can just put it up and then do the demo. So for example, here, just to show you, it might take a little while until you got to the point where it looks like this, because the 13 here is the number. So you have a value. Here we have a select count, where the response codes are greater than or equal 500. And this value we call response code. Then we wire the value here into the response code, and then we just put some font settings. And then you would have the red dot is an element. The white circle is another element. And the 500 here with that line down here, the 5xx, that's another markdown element. And I think this has some custom CSS that makes it stretch all the way. Does this one have any data behind it? No, it's just markdown. Like, there is no data behind. There could be, because you could use a variable in the markdown to actually have a text and then have some numbers updating in the text. And with all these things, you could see here, for example, we have 24 total issues. So we have an SQL query. For those of you who like writing SQL, you will feel right at home, because this is just SQL like we have done it for decades. And you can see total issues with a nice font styling. This one is maybe a bit more interesting, where you basically, these are pre-built. These are the assets that can be filled. And then you have data. And then you can basically have a count where you can say, how far should this be filled? Gadgets like this are built in to make some nice visualizations. Anyway, I think this is as far as we should go. Let me see, did I miss anything? No, I think we covered pretty much everything. So, any questions? Because I've been speaking so much. Yes, please. That was quick. By the way, I will throw the stickers on one of the chairs afterwards to bribe your colleagues. So you can. Hi. Yes, I will try to repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. Right. Is this only for viewing in Kibana, or can I make it publicly available, for example, included on public website or something like that?
So the question is, can I take this outside of Kibana and put it somewhere else? No, unfortunately, Kibana is always a bit of a walled garden, because, yeah, for the other visualizations, you could export it as an iframe, which is super shitty, and you don't want to do that. To my knowledge, this one, the only thing that you could do here is you could export this as a PDF. This is as far as the export goes. I'm sorry, but since this is live updating and this is living within Kibana, I think this would also be very hard from a security model and everything, because this has access to your resources. Though the SQL interface that we have right now is read-only, so that's kind of like a built-in security layer indirectly, but it's nothing you want to really rely on. Yeah, it's part of Kibana. It's very nice there, but it doesn't want to move out. It's maybe a bit like the snail that is carrying around its shell and wants to stick to its shell, I'm afraid. I think you had another question.
Okay. Oh, it works now. Okay. Why did you build a new SQL query interface when you already have the Lucene interface to interact with data?
Yeah, so why the SQL interface? That's a curious question, and I'm admittedly conflicted a bit myself if I really want to use this. So that the general idea is sometimes people don't know about Elasticsearch query syntax, and I don't know how familiar everybody is with the Elasticsearch query syntax, but once you've started writing queries in JSON, you will value SQL again, because you don't have to type that many curly braces anymore. It could go like 5 or 10 nestings down into curly braces. For some people, this is totally fine, and in JSON and for computers, this makes sense, but maybe not for humans. So typing SQL is actually probably a bit easier, and it's also a well-established standard. So a lot of people have the knowledge already, or at least people as old as us have that knowledge already. No, I think that the new generation there's a new generation that was never taught SQL properly, and for them it's kind of like an interesting experience. Anyway, so SQL is on the one hand side is like, it's just knowledge sharing or reuse of skills you already have, and you don't need to learn in a new query language. Especially we've heard from data scientists that they just want to look at some data and want to run some quick experiments without learning a new query language. So the SQL interface is helpful for that. On the other hand, there are a lot of tools that we don't want to rebuild. So we partially rebuilt PowerPoint, but we don't want to rebuild all the BI tools. And we have a JDBC and also an ODBC interface. Though the ODBC interface costs money because that's probably more enterprisey. But if you have some BI tool and you say you have a lot of data in Elasticsearch already, and your BI tool wants to take a look at what you have there, you don't have to duplicate your data. But especially if you have lots of data, this is saving you a lot of money and effort. So we're happy to take some money for that. So ODBC is commercial. JDBC is not open source, but freely available. So you can just use that for free. Those are the two main drivers why would you put an SQL interface on top of that? Because by now, pretty much every NoSQL database, though since we don't call ourselves a database, I wouldn't call us a NoSQL database anyway, but most or many of the NoSQL databases have a SQL similar interface by now, which is slightly ironic, but that's the way it is. And everybody has their own name. I think Cassandra has CQL, Couchbase has Nickel, and various other query languages that kind of try to reuse the SQL knowledge and maybe reuse a bit of the tooling. What we don't do right now is joins. Because since Elasticsearch under the hood is fully distributed, distributed joins, I'm not sure if that is a good idea. Maybe not. Maybe if you have one node, it would be, but for us, I talked about scaling initially. If you build something, we want to scale it to 100 or 200 nodes as well. And probably distributed joins across 200 nodes are not a good idea. So, yeah, no joins for you.
You could use RDMA?
Yeah, you can do lots of stuff. If it will make you very happy in the long run is a different question, but yeah. Anyway, any other questions? We still got some more.
Over there?
Yes, over there. So you can make some movement as well.
Hi. Is the PDF export in the free version of Kibana?
No, the PDF export is also something very enterprisey. And for me, it's always a question like, why would anyone if you have an interactive dashboard, why would you want to export it as to a PDF and then potentially print it? For me, that's something, yeah, exactly, management. And if management wants that, management will have to pay for that, unfortunately. That is part of how my salary is being paid. And I think that's a very fair split. Yeah. Yes, please.
From what you have shown us here today, what is, apart from the PDF export, what is only available in the commercial version?
So in the commercial version, so what I'm using here, this is the mostly open source. Some bits of this, like Canvas itself, is free to use, unless you're Amazon or another cloud provider, then you won't get it, which is our way of surviving. So this is you can use this for free, but some other features are commercial. For example, anything around authentication and authorization is commercial. We have something we call machine learning, but machine learning is a terrible term. It's anomaly detection of time series data. So it will automatically learn what is normal in your data set and can then alert you. Alerts are commercial. All of these are commercial features that we either sell for on-premise licenses, or we have our own cloud service where you get those included with the cost of the cloud service. I think it starts at $16 a month. So for the small setups, the cloud services are what we try to get out. And this is also how we build all of this. We are by now kind of large. We are, I think, 1,200 something, but it changes every week, so it's very hard to keep track. Yes. Any other? No? Then thanks. If you have any other questions, just find me afterwards. I throw the stickers over there, so whoever is first will get some stickers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philipp, for joining us.